America's most unbelievable soldier story. True story. What if a soldier fought for Hitler, then died a hero in the US Army? What kind of man leaps from a cargo ship in the Gulf of Mexico, swims to Alabama, and ends up buried at Arlington? This isn't a movie, it's the true story of Larry Thorne, and what he did might change how you define a hero. The year is 1940. Europe has fallen under the shadow of Nazi Germany, country after country succumbing to Hitler's seemingly unstoppable blitzkrieg. Only one major nation stands defiant in the West, Great Britain. Across the English Channel, the roar of German engines grows louder, signaling the imminent threat of invasion. But this would not be a battle fought on land, at least not initially. This was to be the world's first major military campaign decided entirely by air power. The stakes? Nothing less than the survival of a nation and, arguably, the course of the entire Second World War. As I've delved into the archives, poring over the accounts of those desperate months between July and November 1940, what emerges is not just a clash of machines, but a profound test of human will, strategic ingenuity, and, dare I say, some remarkable, often overlooked vulnerabilities on the part of the aggressor. Join me as we uncover the layered story of the Battle of Britain, a fateful aerial confrontation that changed everything. And stay with me, because as we peel back the layers, you'll see how crucial mistakes, hidden technology, and sheer unbending courage converged in ways that history books often only hint at. Great battles, the Battle of Britain. By June 1940, the picture for the Allies was grim. Germany had achieved a stunning victory in Norway, though it came at a cost to their navy. More significantly, France, a country with one of the world's largest armies, had surrendered on June 17, 1940. This left Britain standing virtually alone against Hitler's ambitions. British Prime Minister Winston Churchill, a man whose words became a rallying cry in this darkest hour, immediately recognized the gravity of the situation. As he told the British House of Commons, "The Battle of France is over," he said. "I expect that the Battle of Britain is about to begin." Hitler's desire to conquer Great Britain was absolute. However, his navy, the Kriegsmarine, had suffered significant losses in Norway, leaving it no match for the powerful British Royal Navy. A direct sea invasion seemed too risky. And so, Hitler decided he would conquer Britain by air. The plan was codenamed Operation Sea Lion. The man tasked with achieving air superiority was the head of the German Air Force, the Luftwaffe, Hermann Göring. Göring was supremely confident, telling Hitler that the Luftwaffe needed only 1 week to defeat England. He looked at the numbers. Germany boasted 2,800 operational aircraft, primarily Messerschmitt fighters and Heinkel B bombers. Against this might, England's Royal Air Force, RAF, could muster only 700 fighter planes. On paper, if numbers alone decided wars, Germany held an overwhelming advantage, nearly 4-1. Göring predicted that after just a week of intense aerial bombing, Germany could launch its ground forces across the Channel and secure victory. Operation Sea Lion began with German fighter pilots attacking England's southern coast. The Luftwaffe struck hard at southern British ports and targeted ships carrying vital war supplies across the English Channel. After this initial wave of attacks, Germany paused, expecting Britain to surrender. But the British people and their leaders showed no signs of giving up. Churchill had told his countrymen they must fight with everything they had, and they listened. Seeing the British resolve, the Luftwaffe shifted its tactics. On August 15th, a day the Germans would later grimly call Black Thursday, they unleashed all 3 of their air fleets in an enormous assault, pounding military communications and command centers. This attack inflicted considerable damage and destroyed a significant portion, 20%, of the already stretched Royal Air Force. Yet the British pilots, flying their iconic Spitfires and Hawker Hurricanes, struck back fiercely on that same day, shooting down 60 German aircraft and killing 190 enemy crewmen. This resilience was the first crack in Göring's confident prediction. As the sources note, battles aren't just won by numbers. Courage, strategy, and tactics are equally vital. The British people, inspired by Churchill's powerful oratory, summoned incredible inner strength. Radio appeals went out for volunteers, calling for men aged 17 to 65 able to fire a rifle or shotgun. Over 1 million Englishmen answered the call, forming the Home Guard, though Britain was so short on weapons that over 20,000 rifles were donated, including the King's personal collection. Strategically, the RAF employed various plans, such as keeping squadrons in reserve. They debated the big wing tactic, using multiple squadrons to attack the Luftwaffe, but ultimately canceled it, deeming the potential loss of precious aircraft too high. But one of the most impactful elements of the British defense was a cutting-edge technology for its time: radar. The name itself, RADAR, is an acronym for Radio Direction and Ranging. It worked by transmitting radio energy that would bounce off objects and reflect back, revealing a target's position. By 1940, Britain had 30 coastal radar stations as part of their Chain Home system. These stations fed crucial early warning information back to command headquarters, supplemented by a network of civilian volunteers in the Observer Corps who watched the skies. This network provided the RAF with invaluable warning time. They knew where the German planes were, how many there were, and where they were headed. This intelligence allowed the outnumbered RAF to use their limited resources far more effectively, timing their interceptions, getting their pilots into the air only when and where they were most needed, and, crucially, getting them to altitude before the German bombers arrived.
The Luftwaffe kept pressing their attacks. They continued to target airfields and military sites, but also bombed cities like Portsmouth. On August 24th, they bombed parts of London, setting the city ablaze. And this, according to the sources, leads us to a pivotal moment, and one of Hitler's most significant errors of the battle. In retaliation for the bombing of London, the RAF flew out and bombed the city of Berlin. Hitler was absolutely furious. His military leaders had assured him Britain couldn't strike Germany. His pride wounded, Hitler viciously retaliated, ordering the Luftwaffe to shift its primary target from RAF airfields, the strategic military objective, to British cities, particularly London. This shift marked the beginning of the Blitz. For 57 straight days, day and night, the Germans bombed London and other parts of England. Hitler believed that by killing large numbers of civilians and causing widespread destruction, he could break the British spirit and create chaos among their military leaders, paving the way for invasion. But this calculation proved disastrously wrong. The British people were, as the source puts it, built of sterner stuff. They endured the bombings, seeking shelter in underground train tunnels, sending their children to the countryside, and carrying on with grim determination. Crucially, by targeting cities instead of airfields, Hitler inadvertently allowed the Royal Air Force to recover. The pressure on the RAF's vital infrastructure, pilots, and planes was reduced. While they continued to suffer losses, they weren't being systematically destroyed on the ground. Furthermore, the Luftwaffe had critical design flaws that hindered their new strategy. Hitler had not developed many long-range bombers. Germany's medium-range bombers, like the Heinkel He-111, were only lightly armed. Their main fighter, the Messerschmitt Bf 109, had limited range, meaning bombers often lacked sufficient protection over Britain. Göring's order for fighters to stay too close to the bombers also hampered them. It switched the fighters from an offensive scouting role to a defensive escort, making the overall force less effective at anticipating and countering RAF attacks. Despite being vastly outnumbered, the RAF, aided by radar and tactical discipline, was able to shoot down significant numbers of German planes. In the first 6 days of September alone, they shot down 125 aircraft. As the battle dragged into autumn, the Luftwaffe continued to suffer heavy losses. They were losing pilots and aircraft at an unsustainable rate. By November, the Luftwaffe had lost over 1,500 aircraft, with more than 2,600 aircrew killed or wounded and another 1,000 captured. Goering was forced to end the costly daylight raids. The promised one-week victory had stretched into months with no end in sight. Finally, in November 1940, Hitler canceled Operation Sea Lion. Britain had won the Battle of Britain. It was a victory secured in the skies. It stopped Hitler's planned invasion and ensured that Britain remained a crucial base for future Allied operations. But the cost was heavy. Over 90,000 British casualties, most of them civilians. Countless buildings destroyed. And the RAF suffered significant losses of aircraft, with around 1,000 airmen killed or wounded. It was this immense sacrifice, particularly by the RAF pilots who bore the brunt of the aerial combat, that Churchill famously acknowledged. Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few. From that day forward, the RAF pilots of the Battle of Britain were known simply as the Few. And the few were not exclusively British. As the pilot shortage became critical, the RAF drew on airmen from across the Commonwealth and other Allied nations. Pilots from New Zealand, Australia, Canada, South Africa, and even one Jamaican took part in the fight.
My work has led me down many historical rabbit holes, but few figures are as compelling as Laurie Allen Turney, later known as Larry Thorne. His life reads like an epic, moving from the frozen forests of Finland to the jungles of Vietnam. What makes his story particularly fascinating, and frankly what drew me to it, is the abrupt, mysterious nature of his disappearance. It's not just a casualty report. It was, for a long time, an unsolved puzzle. And the pieces of that puzzle, as revealed in these historical accounts, speak volumes about the man and the clandestine world he inhabited in his final years. Laurie Allen Turney began his military career in Finland. During the Winter War, a brutal conflict against the Soviet Union, Turney served as a Finnish captain. He led an infantry company and distinguished himself remarkably, even being noted for annihilating Russian divisions. These were the early days of World War II in Europe, and the Finns, despite being vastly outnumbered, proved to be a much tougher enemy than the Soviets had expected. Tactics like the effective use of Molotov cocktails and the deadly skill of Finnish snipers, such as Simo Häyhä, known as the White Death, inflicted heavy casualties on Soviet troops. The sources mention that, between the skiing infantry, Molotov cocktails, and snipers, the Finns killed, wounded, or captured about 500,000 Soviet troops. Ultimately, the conflict ended with the Moscow Peace Treaty, in which Finland ceded territory and economic assets, but notably, Finland managed to preserve its independence. Finland's precarious position next to the Soviet Union led to complex alliances. To hold back Stalin, Finland aligned itself with Germany. It's a crucial point that, during World War II, Finland was the only European country outside Great Britain that was never occupied by enemy forces. During this period, Laurie Turney, following Finland's alignment, was sent to Austria for officer training and became part of Hitler's forces. This transition, fighting alongside a former enemy against a former enemy's enemy, highlights the incredibly complex loyalties and necessities of that era. However, Turney's story takes another dramatic turn after World War II. He worked on a Swedish cargo ship and, in a move straight out of a spy novel, jumped overboard in the Gulf of Mexico and swam to Mobile, Alabama. He became a political refugee in the United States. But his journey wasn't over. In 1953, the U.S. Congress granted him residency, and the very next year, he joined the U.S. Army. It was in the American military that Laurie Turney became Larry Thorne.
He earned a place within the elite Special Forces, a unit known for unconventional warfare. Thorne brought a wealth of experience from his European conflicts, teaching vital skills like skiing, survival strategies, and guerrilla tactics. He rose through the ranks, demonstrating courage and skill, and earned 2 Purple Hearts and 1 Bronze Star. Thorne's service in the U.S. Army led him to Vietnam. The sources specifically mention his second tour in Vietnam in 1965. During this tour, he transferred from the 5th Special Forces Group to a classified Special Operations Unit. The focus of this unit was unconventional warfare. This detail, Classified Special Operations Unit focused on unconventional warfare, is a key phrase from the sources. It tells us he was operating at a very high level, involved in missions that were, by their nature, secret. And this is where the mystery begins. On October 18, 1965, Larry Thorne was supervising one of these secret missions when his helicopter crashed. The crash site was in a mountainous area. What makes this event particularly poignant is that rescue teams were unable to locate the crash site at the time. A soldier with such a remarkable multinational history, a man who had survived the Winter War and fought for years, simply disappeared, lost in the mountains of Vietnam. The fact that rescue teams couldn't find the site immediately is crucial. It underscores the remoteness and difficulty of the terrain where this classified mission was taking place. It also meant that for decades, his fate and the fate of those with him remained officially unresolved in a physical sense. This kind of disappearance, tied to a secret mission, fuels speculation and highlights the inherent risks and often unacknowledged sacrifices of unconventional warfare. From my perspective as a researcher, it's a stark reminder that not all stories from conflict have clean, immediate endings. Some linger, waiting for time and technology to catch up. Time did eventually catch up. The sources state that in 1999, decades after the crash, Larry Thorne's remains were finally recovered. They were brought back to the United States. The sources tell us that United States Major Larry Thorne, also known by his Finnish captain and German officer identity, Lauri Allan Torni, is buried at Arlington National Cemetery. He rests near others recovered from that same secret Vietnam mission. So, the mystery of his disappearance was eventually solved, but the circumstances of that final mission, inherent in its classified nature, remain largely unknown to the public. Thorne's story is a testament to an incredible, almost improbable military career spanning diverse conflicts and loyalties. His death, during a secret operation, followed by decades of being unaccounted for, is a powerful, if somber postscript to a life defined by combat. It forces us to consider the hidden layers of military history and the long, often quiet journeys of recovery and remembrance. This dual identity, the celebrated Finnish hero, the German officer, and the decorated American major, ending in a mystery in Vietnam, recovered decades later, it's a narrative that continues to resonate, reminding us of the complex human stories woven into the fabric of global conflicts. It's a chapter of history that, even with recovery, retains its enigmatic edge.
If Larry Thorne's journey made you rethink the meaning of allegiance, sacrifice, or survival, let it stay with you. Give this video a like if you uncovered something new today. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next deep dive into the forgotten warriors of history. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. Was Thorne a hero, a survivor, or both? Drop your comments below, and thank you for walking these shadows of war with me.